welcome to This Week in Travel. I'm your host Michelle Robson and I'm editor of turningleftforless.com. This week I'm going to be looking at two subjects. The first is going to be the changes in British Airways Holidays double tier points offer, and I'm also going to have a look at using your Avios on airlines other than British Airways. Where should you book and how easy it is to use those Avios on other airlines. Today I'm coming to you from the Kimpton Blythewood Hotel in Glasgow. This is part of IHG and it's a very luxurious hotel. They've recently had a massive refurbishment of the spa. I'm going to be checking that out tomorrow and writing a full review. But I just thought I'd mention it. It's a lovely hotel. It's pretty central in Glasgow. It's got a nice bar and a seafood restaurant here, and you can get some really good offers through using GTC or a similar luxury travel agent. So GTC are Turning Left for Less luxury travel agent partners, and if you book a Kimpton hotel through them, you get special offers. So for example, with this hotel I got £85 hotel credit, I got an upgrade, and I also got free breakfast. So it's a pretty good deal. You basically pay the same rate that you would if you were booking on a flexible rate direct with a hotel, and you also get all your IHG perks. So I got recognised as a platinum member, and you'll collect your normal points as well. So moving on to this week's main topics, first let's have a look at the British Airways Holidays double tier point offer. Now I mentioned this last week when I was talking about getting British Airways status, or more importantly maintaining it. One of the best ways to do this, if you're planning to go on a longer trip anyway, is to use the British Airways double tier points offer. Now the terms and conditions have been pretty loose, but they've gradually been tightened up, and unfortunately they've tightened them up even further. Now this is probably because there were some loopholes, and to be honest, some people were taking advantage of it. We all probably know that people have been going to Sofia and Bucharest, for example, to get their double tier points because there are short haul plus destinations, so you get 160 tier points return in Club Europe, and if you add on a hotel or car hire, then you get 320 tier points, which is a lot for effectively about £220 for Sofia. So you can kind of see why they've tightened it up. So what they've done is two things. First of all, they say that if you book a hotel or car hire, you actually have to use these things. So you have to check in and you have to collect the car hire. They have also changed the terms and conditions in the dates that you can book. Now before, you could book pretty much any date that you wanted, and I mentioned this last week, and I said it probably wasn't worth the risk because I had a feeling that at some point they might try and change the terms and conditions, and they've done exactly that. So now the dates of your car hire and hotel have to be within the dates of the flights. So no more being able to add on a night at Heathrow beforehand. I think that's a bit of a shame actually. I think it should have had a day's grace either side personally, because you might want to stay if you've got a late flight as well, and to me that would be part of a holiday, but unfortunately they haven't, so now it has to be within the dates of the holiday. Now you could book a longer holiday and have those 5 days of car hire or hotel or a mix any point within that time. It just has to be within the dates of the flights. It doesn't have to be the first 5 days or anything like that. It's worth noting as well that the page where the terms and conditions are says it's update as of the 26th of June 2022. Now I didn't notice it said 2022 originally, but obviously it's indicating that it hasn't been updated since then. I actually did some research and I found a page on the Wayback site, which basically will give you historical versions of pages, and I found a page from March 2023 which clearly showed different terms and conditions. So should you have any problems, and I don't think you will, but should you have any problems where you have perhaps not picked up a hire car or not staying in the hotel because you booked prior to this week, then you can go to turningleftforless.com and look at the article there where there is actually a link to the page. So you could use that, because as far as I'm concerned, the terms and conditions when you booked apply. So I think it would be very unfair for them to change that after you've already booked in good faith. Obviously with the car hire, picking up, there's no way that I think that British Airways are going to find out every single person that doesn't pick up a hire car, because obviously it relies on Avios telling them. However, we all know that some places like Sofia, it's probably been abused, and I kind of don't blame them for tightening up, because whilst you may think, well, why do the car hire care, because they're getting money for nothing, trying to manage the inventory of cars when you have no idea which cars are being picked up and which aren't, and you only have limited space at an airport to store those cars, I can totally understand why they'd probably get fed up. And frankly, I'm surprised it's taken this long, because speaking to one of British Airways' senior holiday managers quite a while ago, they were aware of the issue then, so it's not really surprising that they've chosen to do this. So what you can do is you can actually just pick up your car, and then you could just leave it in a car park if you don't want to use it. And actually some of the prices, for example, in Sofia are really cheap. I think you can get a week for around about £35 at the airport of parking. So just because they've tightened the loophole, it doesn't mean that you can't get the car and just not use it for a week, especially if it's going to be that cheap to park it. So I'd be looking, if you were planning to not use your car hire, I'd be looking at where you could park it cheaply for the 5 days or however long you've got it. So all is not lost. There's ways around it, but just be aware of the changes. The main topic for this week is going to be about using your Avios on different airlines other than British Airways. Now, a lot of people are a bit confused by this, I think simply because they don't realise that they already have access to all the different airlines on BritishAirways.com. So when you're searching for Avios flights, if you look at the top, it will always show you British Airways if there's availability, but then it will show partner airlines as well. So it's very simple. If you want to book with Aer Lingus or Iberia or Qatar, for example, then just use the search by specific dates on BritishAirways.com as you would usually, and it should show you all the flights available on partner airlines as well. However, it's not quite that simple. It never is it? So on some of the airlines, you'll actually find it's cheaper to book on the airline's website, not on BritishAirways.com. So two examples of this would be Aer Lingus and Iberia. So both of these have Avios as their currency of frequent flyer miles. So it's relatively easy. All you need to do is to join their frequent flyer scheme, so Iberia Plus or the Aer Lingus Air Club. And once you've done that, then you can transfer your Avios across and you can book through their platforms. Now, it's definitely worth comparing the prices between the two. The availability should be the same, but it's not always. Sometimes the odd quirk in the system, so always worth looking at both. But yes, it's generally the taxes and charges are cheaper on Aer Lingus and Iberia if you book direct with them. They can be incredibly cheap, like under £200 to go to New York with Iberia when I last booked. It's probably changed now, but it's still definitely much cheaper. So worth looking at the differences, and they can be different prices as well in terms of the miles. So I would definitely have a look at booking with them. Qatar is also an interesting one because Qatar have a different feature that's available on their own website. So Qatar have something with double the Avios, which is, I guess, similar to the British Airways Gold availability that you can get, where you pay double the Avios to release a seat. However, the Qatar one is available to anyone, and it can be quite useful. So for example, to go to Australia, you can pay 360,000 Avios instead of 180,000 Avios. Now, why would you want to do this? Well, because the cheaper one isn't available. So it does open up the availability. So it's definitely worth looking at Qatar for that. It's also worth mentioning that Qatar is an interesting one in different ways, in that they have lowered all the prices of their partner airlines. They used to be really bad value for redeeming Avios through Qatar for some of their partners, but this changed in the last few weeks. So they're still not the best value, but there's some interesting airlines out there that you can't redeem on using British Airways. So examples of this would be Bangkok Airways, which actually I think are a really great boutique airline. They fly from Bangkok to the islands and a few other international places, and I've always found the service really good. However, they are really, really expensive, which is kind of surprising for a Thai airline, where you'd expect prices to generally be cheaper than Europe. Actually, probably almost as expensive as British Airways, if not more, given the distance of some of the flights. So definitely worth looking at using your Avios on those in case you have lots of Avios to spare and you don't want to spend the money on the Bangkok Airways flights. So to look at the partner airlines on Qatar, this is where the problem comes in. So unfortunately you can't book live. for most of the partner airlines. You can book for Qatar and British Airways, but that's pretty much it. The rest of them is a really stupid system, in my opinion, where you actually have to fill in a form and wait for them to reply. That can take forever, or phone them up. So I would definitely not use the online form. When I tried, I think it took about 2 weeks to get a reply saying there's no availability. Well, there was probably when I applied for it, but not by the time they got round to looking for it. So yeah, if you're using one of the partner airlines, definitely phone up Qatar Airways to book them. Otherwise you'll find that it could take a long time to get a reply, and you might not get the availability even if it was there when you initially applied. So whilst we've been talking about Iberia and Aer Lingus, it's probably also worth mentioning that you can now use your British Airways companion voucher on these. And the good news is that you can just book it in exactly the same way as you would book normally for a British Airways companion voucher. Just go into the booking online system and use the tick the box for using your companion voucher, which should show you if you're logged in, and then it should show you the Iberia and Aer Lingus flights, and you get exactly the same discount as you would on British Airways, where it's one person goes free in terms of Avios, but you still have to pay the taxes and charges. What you can't do is then go to Iberia or Aer Lingus and get the cheaper price and still use your companion voucher. You do have to book through the BritishAirways.com site. So swings and roundabouts there, but it's still going to work out cheaper in terms of Avios, just a question of how much you want to pay for the taxes and charges. You can also get a 50% off if you're travelling on your own on Iberia and Aer Lingus using that British Airways American Express companion voucher. It's also worth mentioning that with Iberia, you will need to have set up your account sometime in advance before you can actually transfer Avios in and out, and you also have to have earned an Avios to be able to do that. So I always recommend, as soon as you start collecting Avios, even if you don't think you're going to use it necessarily, it's always worth setting up your Iberia account so you can start the clock running. So the criteria for being able to transfer in or out of an Iberia account is 90 days. So your account must be 90 days old, and you also need to have earned at least one Avios. Now, it doesn't have to technically be earned. You could transfer some points from American Express membership points, or you could also transfer them from a hotel scheme. Plus you could also earn a small amount on something like Avios, for example, or if you really wanted to, you could credit one of your flights to Iberia, though obviously you wouldn't get the tier points for British Airways. So there are relatively easy ways to earn those points. But as I said, it's definitely worth setting up an Iberia account, even if you don't think you were going to use it, because you never know, they might do another special offer like they did a few years ago that was really great, with a reduced amount of Avios to go anywhere, or special offers to earn Avios. So always worth doing. It doesn't cost anything, and worth trying. It's also worth mentioning that when you are setting up these accounts and you want to transfer between them, you need to make sure that all the details are exactly the same as the British Airways account you want to transfer in and out of. Otherwise you might run into difficulties. Fortunately, with Qatar, it's a lot easier. You just need to set up your account, and then you should be able to link it to your British Airways account and then transfer instantaneously backwards and forwards. There are some people that have had a few issues setting it up. I don't know what the reason for this is. I haven't heard that there's anything specific that's caused the problem, but you would have to contact Qatar Airways. So I always say, again, it's worth, if you think you might use it, trying to do it now, so that if there is a problem, you're not panicking at the last minute thinking you're about to lose the Avios flights that you found. So always worth setting these things up in advance. In terms of searching for the flights, it's also worth bearing in mind that there aren't sites like Seat Spy or Reward Flight Finder that show the equivalent of Iberia and Aer Lingus and Qatar flights. Hopefully in the future some of these other sites might start doing it, but there's no easy way to find them other than looking at the sites themselves. There are ways to look at it using some of the paid subscriptions where you need to know what the reward flight fare bucket is, which is obviously a lot more complicated and probably more effort than most people want to go to, and then generally you've got to put in the exact dates that you're looking for, so it's not as useful as some of the other sites. So really the easiest way is to just pick some dates and just do some searching on British Airways or the airline's own website. The other one that I would mention is Vueling, which is a completely different way of redeeming Avios and slightly complicated, because in effect you're paying with Avios, a bit like paying cash and then offsetting the cost with some Avios. So it's slightly more complicated, and I will put in a link below to something that explains the process. Generally, I wouldn't bother using them on Vueling. They're not particularly great value, but it is technically possible, but it's quite complicated and you need to have a Vueling account as well. So ideally, I wouldn't bother, because it's a lot of hassle for not a lot of gain, unless they happen to be particularly expensive flights for some reason. With American Airlines, it's very straightforward. You can't redeem anywhere else because American Airlines don't use Avios, so you would have to use the British Airways website. However, there are some advantages in that you can now use a gold upgrade voucher on American Airlines, which you couldn't before, so that's quite handy, and you can find the availability easily normally on British Airways. Some of the rates are actually pretty good for the domestic flights they've found, with the taxes and charges very low, so always worth considering if there's an expensive domestic flight. However, I normally find that the availability is pretty bad on these. I think it's very different to what an American Airlines own frequent flyer can see on their website, but unfortunately that's the choice that you get on British Airways. So that's a summary of the main airlines that you would probably want to use on your British Airways Avios. If you've got any questions or comments, as always, feel free to add them below. And until next week, that's all from me. Until then, happy travels.